Visit Avery.com, Avary, for the most up-to-date news and information on Team Avery.
Avery, 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 Avery.
The Video Archives podcast with Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avery is back for season 2. Head on over to patreon.com/videoarchives to get ad-free exclusive content and bonus episodes. This is the Gala Show. I'm your reporter on the beat, Gala Avery. On this episode, my guest is an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker and investigative reporter who lived a very public battle with addiction. Now he's laying it all bare in his newest documentary, Back to One, which chronicles his journey of hitting rock bottom, selling his Emmy, and how he picked up the pieces and has set out to help others and change lives. Today on the mic, I have Rob Koebel. Hey, Rob.
Gala, it's nice to have you here.
Thank you for coming onto my show, and also thank you for sharing your documentary with me. I really enjoyed it.
Did you like it?
I did. I really enjoyed it, especially because it's just like, it's a story that can happen to anyone. And also, some of my listeners will know, but like my dad had a very public legal battle when he had a DUI and a car accident. And so it's like, it was very relatable to me to kind of watch the documentary. And it's like, people don't understand how difficult it is to be publicly shamed in a weird way. That's like the best way I can put it. When you live a very public life, but you still have your private self.
Sure.
And I think there needs to be a little bit more compassion from others.
Sure.
For everyone makes mistakes.
Because that affected you too,
because
right?
It affects everyone involved. It's like there's a ripple effect, and it affects friends, family. And just because something is so public doesn't necessarily always mean that's the way it happened. But yeah, I think it's good to shed light that, one, there needs to be more compassion for people when they're going through things, because everyone makes mistakes, and two, you're 100% able to change your life and pick up and go from there. So I really appreciated the documentary, and I can't wait for other people to see it.
Oh, thank you. That means a ton to me.
So before we bring up the topic for today, I have a question for you, and I know what your topic is, so I have like a few questions that I was swimming around in my mind. But I think I wanted to go back because I wouldn't call myself an investigative journalist. I do an interview series and I enjoy talking to people. But what you did when you were doing investigative reporting is very enlightening for someone like me, who is going into people's lives and is basically talking to them about their life and what they're doing. And so I wanted to ask you, what would be one piece of advice that you would have for someone who wanted to become an investigative reporter?
Gosh, that's a great question. You do have great questions. Thick skin, is one of them. It is not a job where I made a lot of friends, but I made a lot of contacts in the sense that I was fair. And it was always important to me. What you said, briefly, is that there are both sides to all these different stories. And, I came in with, passion and compassion. And I would like to give people a fair shake. So if you're looking to get into investigative journalism right now, maybe it's documentary, style, it is heavy lifting.
Mm-hmm. You have to do a lot of it yourself, and you get told no a lot.
Which is a lot like Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
Trying to fund a movie or something like that. You get told know a lot, but one of the things that also separated me in, I still struggle with, people say you're really good, but with the success I had was public records, knowing how to find those things, how do you stand out of the pack, right?
The research that you have to do.
Absolutely. But then depending on what venue it is or what medium that you're using, you have to move fast. And in this day and age, there's so many more things that you're using as tools opposed to what, I was working with 12 years ago. But, we had, LexisNexis and different,
The library.
Or back in the day when I was in Phoenix, it was literally going to the basement of the courthouse and hoping to be the first reporter that got there because Lou Ruggiero had already checked out the file and maybe there was a page missing that I needed. Those were the crazy days of competitiveness.
That's funny.
So
I wonder if that exists anymore.
A lot of it is online. Mm-hmm. Some of it still is. And the people that I talk to, they don't really know that skill. And, I enjoyed it immensely, but you don't make a lot of friends, and that's okay. I just always wanted to be fair. A big thing was a lot of the times, you got to have that thick skin because you're now tracking down that person to talk. I'm not going to take some email of a statement, right? You know, my is to have this opportunity to sit and ask those questions. That's where I got paid my money, is to, you know, be on your feet, quick, think, talk. And so, you know, usually I would send the email and maybe a FedEx letter, and then it became the unscheduled interview, right?
Yeah.
Which never makes anybody happy.
No, because they're jumping on them. And all of a
That's
sudden,
right.
as I mentioned, I never want to gotcha, but sometimes you have to with people, especially when you are tasked with actually investigating something
Yeah.
and uncovering information.
Getting
It's
that
less
answer.
It's less of a conversation and more of just getting the answer.
Yeah, and they all knew eventually, and that became a style, especially in Milwaukee, is like, well, this guy's not going to take an email. He's going to show up eventually. But I always, you know, it wasn't a surprise. It was a surprise when I finally found him, you know, but I would be coming.
They knew you were on your way.
Oh, yeah. The only thing, yeah.
Now, as always, my guest gets to bring their topic to the mic. So, Rob, why don't you tell us what your topic is and why you decided to choose it?
Well, I mean, you touched on it a little bit in the introduction here, is people make mistakes. I'll talk specifically about myself. I made mistakes in my life. They don't define who I am. They crushed me. They make me feel guilty. You're full of shame and different things that I was, but you could rewrite it. So here's my thing. You're just starting your acts, right? You're you know, beginning these acts and things change. Have you ever thought about those moments where you would rewrite your life, your story? And what would you say?
But before we get into the topic, it's time for a commercial break. Back by popular demand, the Video Archives merch store is up and running. Get your favorite t-shirts, hats, notebooks, stickers, and more at videoarchivesmerch.com. You know me. I write all my notes in the Notes on Cinema notebook, the Gala edition, of course. Check out videoarchivesmerch.com to get yours today. Hey, thanks so much for being a loyal listener. If you want to keep up with me off mic, make sure to follow me on Instagram at Gala Avery. And we're back. That's our topic for today, rewriting your story. I have 30 minutes on the clock and our time starts now.
Wow. I feel pressure.
No, you don't have to, because the timer doesn't really exist. It's just off in the distance. As I mentioned kind of before we got on the interview, I was telling you that I have a lot of male friends that they come to me and they're like, I'm going into college and I don't know what to do. And I feel so much pressure to pick exactly what I need to do in my life. And once I pick, I can't change it. And I don't believe that, because I 100% believe that you can change your life at any point. When you first went to college, you were in Florida. But before that, actually, one thing I loved about the documentary is you talked about your love for Universal Studios.
Yeah.
And that like you just wanted to be there because it sparked something in you.
That's right.
Was that like a formative moment, you think, in your life?
It was.
Yeah.
I mean, it sparked this energy, this excitement. And maybe that was a little part of the journalism too, is I wanted to know more about Hollywood. You know, I had all these shows and movies that I loved, but whoa, wait a second. Now I'm seeing all this, how it happens. And I'm like, oh, I like this. I don't know what I want to do in it, but I like this. And maybe I'll sample things along the way. And, you know, maybe that was always the questions, you know, that I had in my mind, and the eagerness to learn about different things.
Because when I'm watching the documentary, I'm learning about you. So it's almost like I have like that, I know you, but I don't know you yet. But when you ended up moving away from Los Angeles, I think that could have been a really disappointing thing. But then when you talk about the relationship with your grandparents and how your grandfather, he was in theater and it kind of helped spur your love for it, you can really find those things anywhere.
You can. And now especially things have changed a lot. So there were so many unfulfilled dreams that I had when, you know, we got news that we'd be moving to Ann Arbor, Michigan. You know, and as a teenager entering those years, I was probably pissed.
What year was that?
So that would have been right after the Olympics. It was 85.
Yeah, because I just rewatched Bad News Bears and Breaking Training. Yeah. And when I'm watching that, I was talking with my dad and I was like, is this like how every parent was? How every parent like in the 70s just kind of like disappeared? And we had this discussion where it was like parents now take into consideration their children's wants.
Yeah.
Parents back then did what they needed to do for themselves, and the kids were along for the ride.
Yeah.
And so it's like you have these unfulfilled dreams of like you want to stay and like you want to be in this place, but then you're just picked up and moved.
Yeah, and they were great when we were living out here for about 4 years. They, were like, anything I liked, they leaned into. For example, I begged them, we were living in Palos Verdes, and I begged them to take me to the open casting call, the cattle call at Paramount when it still had Bronson. You pull up to the big gates in the road. Yeah, I mean, way before your time.
I know.
But that was put in the calendar. And I used to run down in the morning and get the calendar, and see on the Sunday and see what's going on. Please take me. So their idea was, we'll take you. They thought it was going to be hours and hours on end. And I'd be sitting on the sidewalk. Well, casting people came out, you, and you, come in. And I go through the gates. First time I go into Paramount, into a soundstage. And I'm like, this is just even better. And they were casting for Joe Dante's Explorers. They had the leads for the parents, but they needed the kids. And I was just enthralled with the fact I was on a soundstage. And I asked them, it was set up. I said, well, what's in here? They had bleachers and everything. Some show about a bar. It was Cheers.
So you were like exposed immediately kind of to behind the scenes.
That one, yeah. In the 4 or 5 years that we were out here, I would see it through, there was a special event where my parents surprised me with a VIP tour at Universal back in the days when you still had to pay and really know somebody, So that took me behind the scenes. And then there was a thing years and years ago, it was called Hollywood on Location. You could literally buy a map of what they were filming that day and drive around. So we did Knight Rider, The Fall Guy, Remington Steele, and I would stand out there and wait, for hours. Back in those days, it was Riptide, and my parents, it was a different time, so they could leave us down with a bunch of crew, right, down at King Harbor, and I could talk to people and do all that stuff. So they were always good about that. And then it just, it became this opportunity that, my dad for business had to leave and we were going back to family. But yeah, my heart was here.
Your heart was here, but then because of your grandfather and he was in community theater, so you maybe had that a little bit in your DNA even, that kind of desire for the stage performance, but you ended up doing the investigative reporting, and it's funny because it's like you're on a stage in a different way. But you're not like, okay, wait a second. I was going to say you're not playing a character when you're doing newscasting, but maybe you are.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yes, there was. I mean, I look back at it now, and there was somebody that I did when I had to go out there, and you're an investigative reporter. I don't think it's exactly what you see every day that I had there, So there is a character to it. And at the end, I think that was part of the struggle that I didn't like, right? I mean, don't forget that, this is centered around ratings. And, this is, these stories would come up with that, whatever you were doing. And I didn't necessarily always agree with those stories. So that's that conflict right there that I don't like.
Yeah, because you're playing a role and you have to meet the ratings.
Yeah.
And you have to sell that story in a light that's going to get those ratings. And it might not be your personal take on it necessarily. It could
Absolutely
be, it could not
not.
be.
No, I want to do a thing, but in my style, as you saw in there, where I really, made more of the money, made the contacts and got it, was being able to discuss or bring a microphone out to somebody and have that. So the camera's back at me, right? And I got to be on my toes. But that was the interaction between the people I was doing the investigative story on or whatever it was. You become that character.
Yeah.
Okay. And I didn't expect, through the years later on when I really hit those skills, what an impact it would have.
Yeah, because also it's like people, when they see your face on the news, they assume that is who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Because like when an actor is playing a role in a movie, it's like this person is starring as this character. But when it's just like, oh, that's my newscaster that I see every day or every morning.
They think you're family.
They think you're family. It's like, and they might feel betrayed at some certain things or behaviors, or they might love things that you do, and they take it personally because they don't see that there is Rob personal and Rob on TV.
Right. I mean, it's a really good point. It was, as things changed in the media, 12 years ago when I was doing it, I can't imagine what it'd be like now, because when I was working in Milwaukee, heading up the investigative unit there, it was really heavy lifting, okay? And I hit the ground running, to the chagrin of a lot of people in town. When things fell apart there, I think the only thing that was bipartisan was that I quit. I think they all celebrated that and then went back to fighting and doing their own thing.
Well, I think it must have been really difficult, though, to have that pressure of, like, this is who I have to be and this is what I have to do, and just...
Well, it's also the pressure and, definitely pressure there. And then wherever anybody else feels is, how are they going to stop me, right? So what are they going to find?
Well, that's the thing. I have to say, people that like to do investigative reporting and like to do interviewing, we like to gossip. I mean, it's kind of our trade. And all of a sudden, it's like when you can gossip about each other and you can kind of inflame certain things that are going on in people's lives that, in my opinion, should be private sometimes. I think there should become some level of respect there of, like, someone is going through something, let's not put it on full blast. But sometimes they want to. And sometimes it happens and it becomes very public.
And, sadly, with the, struggle of addiction that I had, my reporting on TV took a side. It didn't become the interest. It became my ex-wife, who was my co-anchor, writing a tell-all book about our marriage, right, and a couple country music songs. She's anchoring on CNN. It becomes like, oh, what's going on in here? He's had these DUIs. He had this run-in with America's toughest sheriff in Arizona. Now it's spun out where people aren't really paying attention to me.
It's the story.
The story, yeah.
It becomes
But it's
bigger.
also used as a way to put a dent in my armor. What kind of dirt can we find on him? And I'm like, oh, shit, hold on.
But what's interesting is that sometimes for people, those dents in the armor are what get them to turn to sobriety.
Sure.
And sometimes it's what gets you to turn to the bottle.
Yeah.
Like, it's not the thing that because everyone is so individually minded when it comes to their drinking. And I don't know how much you want to talk about that.
Sure, I have no problem.
I mean, in your documentary, you talk that you started young. Like, it was in high school.
Yeah.
And do you think that just like the early introduction to that, I mean, one thing that you said to me, or not to me, but you said on the documentary was, I didn't like the taste of beer, so I had to drink it faster.
Yeah, I love the feeling.
Yeah, and it's just like, because you didn't like the taste, though, you had to drink it faster and you had to just get it quicker. And I find that just fascinating.
Yeah.
That's kind of what maybe started it, but it's not liking the taste.
Yeah, but it was the feeling.
Yeah.
I think my dad had said to me, you wouldn't sit down and have 6 Coca-Colas in a sitting,
well,
but I would.
Yeah.
Well, but sometimes that also shows the character defect. I'll sit down and have 6, vodkas on the rocks.
Yeah.
Right? But it was never enough. But I liked the feeling, and the feeling gave me that bulletproof confidence to ask out, Sarah, or to do whatever it was.
To go for something. Like, it released inhibitions.
I think that immediately there's an emptiness. Okay. And I don't know that yet, but I don't have the confidence, right? And that's giving me the confidence. And it works really well until it doesn't work anymore, and then really, really bad.
I also feel, though, like in that time where it's like the late 90s, early 2000s, people kind of talked about addiction less.
Yeah.
I feel like now it's like it's more in the limelight, like, of these behaviors are these things. Like, we understand it better now. But back then it was just a different time. It's Y2K. It's like you're partying. It's more
some
normalized.
people can,
And some people can.
And I'm jealous. If I could, I would. And I still struggle with, and I'm disappointed. It's why I'm so outspoken about it. The stigma that still exists. I was at Universal Studios eating on the lot. I'd had a meeting. It was at the commissary, and I hadn't seen this person in 20 years, an NBC News executive. And that person walked in and, oh my God, Rob, had some people introduced and said, he was incredible. He was our star. He was the one that got all the interviews. But don't Google him. Yeah, and that's what I did. And normally I'm pretty quick on my feet. I said, please do. You can see what I've done in 12 years. But I was really taken back, and I had to think for a moment, oh, did I not make an amends to this person was a friend.
Yeah.
And it caught me there. So even when I bring up addiction sometimes, or we're at a bar, because I live a normal life. And somebody asks, and I'm like, I'm in recovery. The eyes dart all over the place. They don't know what to say.
I remember I went out on a date with a guy once, and I don't drink, and it's just like a personal choice. I don't have an issue with alcohol or an issue with substance, but I just choose not to do it. I would say I'm a vacation drinker, but it's like it doesn't even happen. I was on vacation recently, and it didn't even happen. I was like, okay, I guess I'm not doing that. But like I choose not to, and I went on a date with a guy, and he was like, oh, well, why don't we get drinks? And I was like, well, I don't drink. And he's like, oh, actually, I don't either. I'm sober. And I was like, okay, like, let's talk about that. Then, like, why did you invite me out for drinks? Like, why didn't you ask me out for coffee? And he's like, oh, because, like, girls prefer to go out for a drink. And I'm like, but doesn't that put you in, like, a bad situation or something? And he was kind of like, I have to live my life also, though. It's like, I have to just be doing things. I don't think personally he was in that place yet to be doing that. I think you need a little bit more strength to... or so like a solid foundation. But it was like an interesting conversation because we kind of had the thing of him saying like, wow, like I wish I could not drink because just I didn't feel like it, but like really I have to focus on it.
Yeah.
And I'm always so surprised at how many young guys I know that like are dealing with that.
Yeah, there's ways to deal with it. I mean, especially out here, maybe you're aware of it or maybe you're not, and you'll freak out when I tell you that. But I go to AA meetings, that part you won't freak out about. Yeah. But there's ones in bars. At 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to meet a group of, I usually go to a lot of just men's meetings, and we have that. I don't notice anything in there, okay? And a lot of people that come in there, they will have the history of like, oh shit, I remember being thrown out of this bar.
Is it like to like exposure therapy in a weird way? Like to get them like, we're just doing something in a bar that's not drinking? Is that what it is?
A lot of people ask that, and I know you got a psychology background too, right? Yeah. No, this was simple in the fact that when we were looking for a group, this group has been around for 32 years. When we were looking for a group, nobody would have us.
Really?
Yeah. So you would go to all these different places. Nobody would have us. That bar said yes. There's another one, and I know the owner. I've met him a couple of times, the Rainbow Bar. Okay, so I was working post-production up on West Hollywood, and somebody said, hey, there's a great meeting at the Rainbow Bar. So at noon, I was like, okay, I'll go and check it out. So I walk into the Rainbow. I'm like, somebody's messing with me. I walk in, and I'm looking around. I'm like, there's no meeting in here. So I'm like, oh, I'm the idiot. And the bartender goes, you looking for a meeting? And I'm like, oh my gosh. And she's like, follow the stairs. So I go up to the stairs, and it's the vampire lounge. The vampire. Have you been up there?
No, but it's so funny though because it's like you go to the vampire lounge for your meeting.
Well, back in the day, that's where Mickey Dolenz, John Lennon, Alice Cooper, they all got just messed up and trashed, and now they do that.
Well, because bars want people to drink responsibly.
Sure.
They don't want to foster addiction. And so I think it's great that they're opening their doors to say, you know what, come, like, we're going to accept the meeting here. I think it's shocking to me, though, also that other places wouldn't.
Yeah.
Like, why?
Well, there's still a lot of it out there. There's still a lot of it. And, even with some of my bosses at Universal Studios, they don't mean badly, but, derogatory comments, alky, junkie, we're better than that. People are hurting, and
people.
Go ahead.
Like, no, people are people.
People are people, but it's just something that people don't understand. Like, so I stop. You've got the psychology, background. So I stopped drinking. That is just a symptom of what's underneath.
Oh yeah.
Oh, now here's the good news. And it's so cliche, but the good news is you're going to get your feelings back. The bad news, you're going to get your feelings back. And then I have to navigate, specifically in, my marriage, the guilt and shame, surrounded that. And when she wrote a tell-all book about our marriage, I hadn't thought about, well, of course I thought about it, but I hadn't dealt with those issues. And when I read it, that tears off a Band-Aid. And I was in no place I didn't have any tools.
Well, I think there's also, and I think it's less now, but it still exists, is there is a stigma about men's mental health specifically.
Sure.
And like men talking about their feelings and men sharing their emotions. And there is this need that the man be the protector, the provider, the rock, the stable force in a relationship, in a friendship. Like, for example, it's like, no matter how hard I waver, my father is always going to be the strong one for me. But I know that he has feelings and he has complex emotions and things that he's dealing with from his childhood as well.
Sure.
But I feel like back then it was probably also like, oh, you don't talk about it.
That's right.
You just deal with it.
And I'm more your dad's age. Yeah. And it's like, that's the cusp of like, things were changing a little bit. When you get to my parents' age, that's definitely a generation. We don't talk about these things, right?
And they don't teach you how to talk about them.
No. And with the lack of understanding for addiction and really why I'm doing it, I just have an emptiness. So the Emmy Awards, the Beautiful Wife, all this stuff was never going to be enough.
It wasn't going to fill that hole.
It was never going to, and I tried with everything I possibly could.
So we talked a little bit about where it led, but I want to talk about those 12 years, like what you've done since then, because that's like what you said.
Oh, that was nice. And that is something so what I had to do is I had to take responsibility, something that I think is missing in the world today quite a bit.
I agree with that as well. I think people are very quick to kind of just blame others for things. And sometimes I learned two things. One, it's like you have to take responsibility for your actions, what you do, and it's okay to say sorry.
Yeah.
And to mean it.
It's even better to say it.
It's great to say you're sorry and to mean it. But also, if you're in an argument and you realize you're wrong, the best thing you can do is say, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Like it takes nothing. It's actually a strength to know when you're wrong.
Right.
And I think responsibility is very important. So you took responsibility.
And it took a long time. It took some time. I started with a lot of resentments against my ex-wife who wrote the tell-all book, about our marriage and how she escaped an emotionally abusive marriage to me when I was drinking. That hurts. But there's truth to that. So how do I navigate that, right? So I navigated with a group of guys that I love and that are, as close to me as brothers. And then I start working through the wreckage of your past. The film starts out with a quote from Brad Pitt. Everybody focuses about the night in Milwaukee where I'm pissing on the Apple Store drunk. He doesn't say that. But they focus on that moment of, that doesn't define you, but what will define you is what you do afterwards. And what I really wanted to, with the film to do Back to One, and it's a total play on Back to One, is like when I learned on a set for the first time what Back to One meant, I'm like, wait a second, I can keep going back to one over and over until I get it right. I tried lots of different careers along the way as I, found my way back. I didn't want any of this. I just wanted to work in addiction and treatment. I didn't want the acting. I didn't want the producing. But the beautiful thing that happened when I took responsibility and I worked through the wreckage, I now pick up from where 40 years ago I left Palos Verdes, and I'm living those dreams that I had. It's like I didn't see it happening. And it blew me away when I'm like, oh, wait a second, you're bitching about what you wanted as a kid. And I'm like, wow. But now mindful that I'm 54 years old and I'm doing things that, some of the people started out doing in their 20s, whether it's, dating on the Steve Harvey show, being your bachelor or whatever. And I'm like, oh, is this so cliche? But I'm laughing. I mean, I should enjoy every moment of it.
It's gratitude. I think that's also something that you learn when you've gone through something. You learn gratitude and you learn to be thankful for the everyday life things that you gain.
Yes.
What was the catalyst, though, that made you finally take responsibility?
Because
was there a moment where you just realized, I just have to do it?
Well, specifically with my ex-wife, I mean, I never thought I would quote Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper, but there was a scene in A Star is Born where she's in the bathtub, he comes in drunk, and he's got some pills in his pocket, and she's upset, she's hurt, right? And he responds, she says, why don't we just get drunk and, let's blast off into La La Land. Well, I remember a conversation like that. And before his line, I knew exactly what he would say. And this says, he says, you're fucking ugly. And I had to get up and walk out. Because that guilt that is there, and it scared me. Because normally I'm not like that. But I got up and walked out. Whoa, what happened here? And then when the film finishes up, I realized that Lady Gaga, quoting Lady Gaga, all she wanted was a happy life for them. And I realized at that point my ex-wife wanted the same thing. But I didn't see it, and I didn't want her to go through life wondering how much was her fault. Now listen, she ain't perfect either. Okay?
Nobody's perfect. But again, that's taking the responsibility.
Yes.
Is that you take responsibility for your part in a situation.
I want to free her up from that.
Yeah.
Like you did, you did what we could. We were young. We didn't know, we were scared. I was scared. I'm sure she was too. So, and then the rest of the things, as I go along the way, the cops, that arrest me in Milwaukee, let's make it right, man. Working through that wreckage, actually, it's not as much for that person on the other side as it is for me.
Yeah.
But it also lets my ex-wife know, if you need to talk about it sometime or something like that, I'm in a place where I can, and I understood, what she did is only what she knew.
Yeah. So when we talk about rebuilding your life and rewriting your story, what was the first step there? So it was taking responsibility. And then how did you find yourself through that?
Well, I hit a stall at about 3 years in because I really wasn't working a program. I had a great job. I enjoyed working for a minor league baseball team in Charlotte, but I was scared it wasn't working. And, I lost everything. I sold my Emmy Award.
Yeah.
Right. And I knew that there was something in that was a commodity. And what out here is a commodity but a story?
Yeah.
Where else but
a story and a dream.
A story and a dream. So it didn't take long. I had a really rough night at the baseball team, pulling the tarp, running in the race, dressed up in the furry thing. I mean, very humbling. And I'm like, oh, this is a shit show. I got to get out of here. And I don't, not really heavily religious, but I prayed and I said, God, if this is where you want me to be, great. If not, you see this is a shit show. 3 days later, casting people from Hollywood called and said, we'll give you the world's best life coaches if you'll tell us your story, and we'll help you get over that. So when I came out here and I quit the job, I got nothing. It's 3,000 miles, 2,000 miles. And I realized the things that they were telling me in treatment, the resentments against the ex-wife, well, that's your problem. I'm like, oh, wow. Now I got to trust these people. I got nowhere else to go back to.
Well, sometimes it's also like people will tell you something and tell you something and tell you something, and like you don't really hear it. And then finally you actually, there's a difference between listening and hearing, I guess, and like knowing.
Sure. Well, and finally, I was backed into a corner, and that was a good corner. And, what I wanted to do was just work with people in addiction recovery. I think you like Malibu too.
Yeah.
And I love Malibu, and I was around a lot of recovery. And that was that started me looking at myself, started working through the other things, being around those folks, some amazing stories. Sun Life Organics, Khalil Rafati, has built this just dynasty and dream of what he liked. I love that. We've come to Hollywood where you probably could reinvent yourself. And then when things went south at a treatment job that I had, I was really forced into knowing just trying to find my way and survive. So I had to take skills of being a journalist and learn to act, learn voiceover work that's different from what I'm doing, but realizing, wait a second, this is sort of what you want.
But it's interesting though. It's like you have to think on your feet. You have to learn how to pivot. And I was talking to a friend of mine and she works in post. And we were talking about how the entire film industry, when you work in it, you know how to pivot. You're constantly changing what you have to do because that's the industry. It's fluid.
And that's what I love. I love your hustle.
Yeah.
I love that around here. So what do I do now? Okay, these are the skills I have. A pivot. It's the great pivot. And especially after the pandemic, I moved in here 6 years ago and I was like, I got the perfect plan. SAG-AFTRA is across my street. I'm taking the classes. I'm doing all pandemic. Yeah. So I got to pivot. And I'm older, and pivoting seems to hurt a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a slower ship.
Yeah, to steer that ship,
steer it. Yeah.
But I have so much respect, for those in the industry that do that. Any industry, sometimes lawyers have to pivot from criminal defense till they find out bankruptcy's good, and they get that skill.
Yeah, or sometimes a doctor, or sometimes also
sure.
maybe. I know kids that are like, I'm gonna go do. I knew someone that was like, I'm gonna go be an EMT. And he was taking the classes and then he got this opportunity and he was like, well, if I take that, like the EMT thing is over forever. And I was like, no, it's not. Just like try it for a bit. If you like it, you can always go back.
See, that's something that I really admire from people too. And there were, when I started out making these pivots and stuff, it was okay if it didn't work. The baseball team, I loved it. I had the best bosses. When they found out I was leaving to go to a movie, do a documentary, they're like, there isn't anything more for you here.
They knew you had outgrown it.
Well, they knew it, and they're like, you've got more to offer. And that's okay. I mean, when I was raised, you'd have one job, and, there's a quote, you got to let go of the life that you always imagine to get the one that's waiting for you. The hero's journey or whatever. I don't like that term necessarily in this aspect.
But everyone is the hero of their own story. I 100% believe that.
You do? Yeah.
Even villains are the heroes of their own story.
Sure.
So.
But and you can change that. And Joseph Campbell is a big key that they play a lot in treatment and getting people to think about it. But yeah, I had to get to a stage because, if you listen to the documentary, my shrink when I got there, he's like, I'm glad I didn't tell you I told you so, but I said my life is over. And they give me, a Dr. Seuss book, right? The places that you will go. I'm like, you got to be shitting me. I lost everything right
And you're
now.
gonna give me
And
this?
you're going to tell me back to my room with the Dr. Seuss book? I almost lost my shit.
Yeah.
And then I read it. And I started thinking about it. Whoa, what are the places I could go?
Yeah.
But to do that, I would have to be able to go ahead and start to work through the wreckage. It's a ton of work. Mm-hmm. People that work in this industry specifically, we make a lot of sacrifices. I miss my family now.
Yeah.
You know, you're lucky to have,
I'm
despite
really
everything that you've gone through, if you started to rewrite your life, you may not have the relationships that you do.
Sometimes I think about that. It's like all the good and all the bad.
That's
it's
right.
like, would I rewrite my life? Would I change things that I've done? Because there are things that I don't want to say I regret doing, but maybe there are things I wish I had done, or there are things that like I could have done better. I could have treated certain people better, or I could have, but those things that I did taught me valuable lessons moving forward.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's it. If it's always a tough thing when I say, "Whoa, I didn't want any of that to happen." Well, then I wouldn't be here with you.
Yeah, because it's like it's not that like you didn't want it to happen, but you don't want the hurt that it inflicted on others
That's
to have
exactly
occurred.
it. That bothers me the most is, I disappointed and I hurt others. But what I can do is now change that. Like
Yeah.
you said, look at me. It's humbling to be a Universal Studios tour guide, and they have done nothing but be fantastic to me. And I struggled when I got there, but I finally realized at the end, and when somebody comes up after a tour, that's as close to Hollywood as they may ever get.
Yeah.
And they're so excited. That's being of service. Okay, so I had some guy come running up, as before I could stand up, his hand was extended. I was a little scared. What was going on? And he was just smiling. He goes, "You brought me back to being a kid, and this is my son. So what's so bad about that?"
Nothing.
But my mind, I get off after doing a tour, and people come running up and they're excited, and I'm like, there was a woman lately that said, she's like, "You're fantastic. You're just amazing. This was so much fun, and I do this all the time." I'm like, "Oh, thanks." And she goes, "Stop." And I'm like, "What?" And she goes, "No, listen to me, please." Thought I was going to get a bill for this. She's a psychologist. She was right.
Yeah.
Take that moment in. That's my job right now. If I'm truly what I want to do with the documentary is be of service and show people to be kind and help others, then get that out of my head. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you what, you go through King Kong, 360 3D, and that 3.5 minute little animation, my mind is spinning out like Leo DiCaprio in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and, throwing stuff around the trailer, because that's what I have to control.
Yeah.
But I have the tools now, and that comes with the experience in the group and asking for help. I hate to ask for help.
I mean, I think it's hard to ask for help, but it also comes hand in hand, like with what that lady said, like when she gave you a compliment, like, "Oh, thanks." Also accepting the good compliments that come to you.
I apologize to her. It's exactly what I said. I don't know how to do that.
And I think that's an important thing, because also when you've dealt with something so public where people are putting you down, it's really hard to know that like these things that you're doing do matter, and it has changed things.
Well, be present. I think that's a very important thing to remember, for me at least, and gratitude.
Gratitude is the attitude. So that's actually all the time that we have for today. But Rob, is there any final thought that you'd like to share with the audience?
I love what we just sort of ended with, gratitude. It's a tough time. People are struggling. People are frustrated. But we can love each other. We can put that hand out to help. We can be present when we're talking. And sometimes, you know what I learned as a secret? All you got to do is listen.
Yeah.
That person just wants to be listened to and seen. So, I hope you continue doing what you're doing, because it's
thanks,
fantastic.
Rob. Thank you.
And I love that. But I really appreciate, the time that you spend and coming down in here and battling the traffic.
The LA traffic, my enemy. So that's all the time that's it for today. Thank you so much to my guest, Rob Koebel, for coming on to the show. And also be on the lookout for Rob's documentary, Back to One. I can't wait for that to be released for everyone to be able to see it. I'm Gala Avery, and this has been The Gala Show. The Gala Show is brought to you by Avery.com. This episode was executive produced by Roger Avery and produced by Gala Avery. Music composed by Andy Milburn. Additional sound mixing by Eric Clapp. As always, I'm your host, Gala Avery. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved. Despite me sharing the same last name with this charity, I don't have any affiliation with it, besides the fact the issue is very near and dear to my heart. Did you know that in the United States, 2.7 million children currently have a parent in prison, and it's estimated that 10 million children have experienced parental incarceration at some point in their lives? I was one of these kids, and as an adult, I am really grateful to be able to give back to Project Avery. Their mission is to build leadership from within by supporting community through programs such as mentoring and outdoor education, and also to remove the stigma surrounding having a parent that's incarcerated. You don't have to feel alone. If you know a kid who could use these resources or would like to donate money or time to the charity, please go to Project Avery, that's AVARY.org, to check out what this amazing charity is all about. Again, that's projectavery.org. Thank you guys from the bottom of my heart.